Hi, this is Stu Stover again, and today I wanted to get into the topic of performance appraisals. So in human resources, we spend an enormous amount of time on the procedures and the policies and the rules and making sure people conform at some level and all sorts of things. And getting people to perform is certainly one of the more interesting challenges in modern organizations. And we see this right now as that companies across the board are struggling with, do we allow our employees to work at home or some combination, or force them to come back into the office, or and in many cases it's a concern of typically two things. One is performance. Are people actually working hard? Are they doing what we want them to do? And the answer is probably, but it's never easy to figure out. And the second is you want to see them. Well, you want to see them for several reasons. Out of sight, out of mind is obviously a problem, and not just in workplace but everywhere else. But you've also got the issue of it's harder to do teamwork, it's harder to collaborate, it's harder to do process improvement, it's harder to do a whole lot of things if people are remote. Now, not that you can't do all those things remotely, because there's all sorts of technology and tools that make that possible in today's world, but again, the issue of trying to sort out how we want to manage our workers and keep them as productive as possible. I mean, the issue from an economic standpoint is pretty simple. You pay them a certain amount of money, you want to get a certain amount of value back from those employees for what they do. And so, it's always interesting. So performance appraisals from a historical standpoint, we've had a million approaches to performance appraisals. In my career, I've probably gone through 30 different approaches to performance appraisals over the years in different companies that I worked for. And it's fairly standard that companies will go, the performance appraisal system we're using right now isn't necessarily doing what we want, so we're going to change something new. Well, anyway, it gets complicated. And so the reality is, typically, performance appraisals historically have been used as a part of the control mechanism of management over the workers. All right. So if you go in a management course, there's the 5 functions of management, and probably in many organizations, the number one thing for management is control. And so this is typically used as many organizations, not all obviously, but many, to impose control over the workers. And so you come into the office, you sit across from the desk, it's a power issue, and you're supposed to be in certain mode as you, very, very unpleasant processes for many employees in many organizations. Now, not always, but it can be that. So what's going on here? The management philosophy is either it's part of the control process or it's part of the development process. So it tends to be one or the other in terms of how this works. And so either we're doing this as a way to help our employees become more valuable to the company, increase their skills, increase their competencies, increase their ability to use their time and energy in ways that benefit the organization, not only today, but down the road. So for many organizations on the plus side, it's a way to help employees figure out how to get a promotion, how to gain more skills, and whatever. The other side is to figure out how to ding them in some way, that we're going to punish them, or we're going to identify the things that they have done wrong and focus on the things they're not good at, as opposed to focusing on the things you are good at. So let me give you a couple examples of how this works. One of my first jobs, I was with a cooperative extension service, part of Michigan State. I was a 4-H agent. Okay, it was a kind of a fun job in lots of ways, working with volunteers and kids, and it was fine. But what we did that first go around, we had this astonishingly elaborate performance appraisal system. So I had a 10-page form I had to fill out. on my strengths and weaknesses and what I did well and what I didn't. It was overwhelming for me. But then my boss did it on me, and then his boss did it on me, and then we came in and it was like they had a big stick and they're beating me on me because I'm not doing this right or that right, or so it wasn't about development. It was informing me what I had done wrong. Okay, and I tend not to be a compliance person, never have been. So of course they're trying to force me to be more compliant and do as I'm told. Okay, all right, some of that's fair. I mean, I understand how organizations work, but they focused on my negatives and not my positives. But the other lesson from all of this is there was so much complexity in this performance appraisal, they could give me whatever raise they wanted because they had plenty of stuff in front of them to justify whatever they wanted to do. And so I would argue one of the things that happens here is the friends of the boss get great reviews and get nice raises. The people that may not be so cozy with the boss may have a far different experience. So there's a lot of personal stuff that shows up with this, and they keep trying to drive that out with one form of performance appraisal versus another. Anyway, but it is a little capricious in many organizations. I can give you a ton of examples, but let me give you one in particular. My dad was a machine repair foreman at Oldsmobile for most of his 30 years at Oldsmobile. Well, machine repair, you've got your 25, 30 guys that are out there doing pipe fitting and machine repair and whatever it is that they do. And when does machine repair work? Okay, they tend to work when the rest of the plant is shut down. It's hard to work on machines when they're running. And of course the plant in those days, you can't shut off the machine because you got to get production. More and more, it doesn't matter if we need them or not, you just got to maximize efficiency of that particular machine. So that he would tend to work a lot on the weekends. Surprise, surprise. I mean, that's when machines might be shut down and you can actually do the kind of repairs and maintenance that needs to be done. So there was one year they were doing what was called the critical incident approach to performance appraisal. So what that meant is when you did something stupid, or a mistake happened, or things beyond your control, you couldn't control, happened on your watch, they would write that down. They would punish you in the moment, of course they would, but write it down and slide it into your folder. And this year that I'm thinking about, I was maybe 12 years old or something, a long time ago. But what happened was, it was one of those years where General Motors was going great guns. They couldn't make enough cars. And so of course Dad is working 7 days a week, frequently 12 hours a day. All right, if you're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, over and over and over again, could some bad things happen along the way? Just because you're tired, because you don't have a downtime, all the stuff. There might be problems anyway, but that scenario of him willing to do whatever it took to be the supervisor of this group meant that certain things happened. So apparently he had a bunch of stuff that had showed up in his file. So a crane hadn't been properly secured, and so it could have been a disaster of some kind, or and this did actually happen. One of his guys stuck his hand in one of the machines and lopped his hand off. Awful stuff. And so he gets to his performance appraisal with his boss and his boss's boss, and they open the file and go, whoa, look at this one, bam. Oh, look at this one, bam. Oh, look at this one, bam. And they went, with no consideration for the fact that he had virtually killed himself that year trying to stay ahead and keep the problems under control, all the stuff that he did that was sort of above and beyond. They just blasted him with all these things. And he nodded, got up from the chair. They said, we're not done yet. He turned around, walked out of the office, walked out of the plant, got in his car, drove to Ludington, got on the boat across to Wisconsin, and then drove back around. Whoa! I'm sure it wasn't really traumatic for him. It was obviously very traumatic for him. The plant then calls my mom, middle of the night, and says, "Where is he? He can't leave the plant. He doesn't have permission. Get him back here." And she's going, this is before cell phones. "I have no idea where he is. I don't know what's going on." 3 days later, he comes back. Everything's fine. He goes back to work as if nothing happened. Oh, he hated Oldsmobile because of the capricious nature of the management and the adversarial stuff and just what they made him do in his job. And performance appraisal was one of the examples. Well, do you suppose that General Motors kept that critical incident approach to performance appraisals for very long? No, of course not. They abandoned that and moved on to whatever the latest gimmick was as a way to do this. And so I could give you 1,000 more examples because in my career I've had all sorts of issues with performance appraisals. But let me argue that one of the big reasons we do performance appraisals is the legal side. So if you're going to fire somebody, you got to have a paper trail. The paper trail can't say exemplary employee, exemplary employee, exemplary employee. Oh, by the way, we're going to fire you. Now, you got to build a trail that there's a problem. And so you tend to focus on the negatives. Okay. Not a great way to build the kind of work environment that you want if you're going to do that kind of stuff. And so again, we tend to hide this, but this is real. This is very much a part of the process. And so I did a lot of negatives here. So let me do some of the positives. If a good company is going to do this, there are ways to help employees figure out what they need to do, what they need to focus on that will most benefit the company. And the kinds of processes, the training they may need, or the additional education, or, okay, we got to get rid of this responsibility, it's not very important, so that you can focus on, So the reality is there's a ton of value in providing feedback, honest, integrity, positive in many cases, sometimes going to be negative, but mostly positive, to say we value you and we appreciate your contributions, and not simply focusing on the negatives. So you all are going to be experiencing performance appraisals over your career, one version or another. One of my quirky ones was a 360 evaluation we talked about for a long time. And so you get your boss, you get your employees, you get your customers, you get, all these different groups that would give feedback about your performance appraisal. Well, that one didn't last real long either, because if you're a customer, do you really care about giving feedback to the organization about this person? I mean, you got your own stuff to worry about. And so it was very, very time-consuming, elaborate, and it didn't necessarily help. So anyway, so the problem was it's very perplexing to know what the best way to do this is. So again, let's go back to the performance improvement stuff. So the idea is we provide real feedback. And to be fair, most people don't have great perspectives. They think they're providing real value. And some of you have seen this, but in some of the organizations I've been in over the years, some of the people who were the least valuable people, did the least amount of work, thought in their heads they were the most valuable and that they should be promoted, and they had all this value they were provided. And you need to have some honest, real feedback to help people understand what their value is, and are they spending their time and energy on the right stuff? Or are they spending their time sitting at their desk playing solitaire all day at work with the opportunity once in a while to actually do something? Well, anyway. So performance improvement is a critical piece that frequently is given lip service, but not necessarily the focus of the performance review. One last thing I want to say about this is that historically performance appraisals are tied to your pay increase. Okay, does that put an extra strain on this whole process for everybody? You bet. And so some organizations have tried to figure out how to separate performance appraisal, performance improvement, from the pay issues that people are going to get in the workplace. Hard to do. Most organizations struggle enormously with that, but it is an issue out there to figure out how to separate those, at least at some level. So hopefully this has helped. You'll do some more stuff in class and performance appraisals and performance reviews and personal improvement plans and all the other crazy stuff that goes on in most organizations today. But it's worth thinking about why we do them and what they're really for. Thank you.